Well, hello everybody. A Champions League round has come to an end once again. And Arsenal, not only did they concede their first goal in the Champions League this season, they lost their first game in the Champions League this season to Inter, who fly up the table into 5th position, leaving Arsenal away down in 12th between Juventus and Bayer Leverkusen. Jim Campbell, a frustrating evening for those Gunners.
Yeah, although it doesn't actually sound as bad as all that when you put it like that. Between Bayern Leverkusen and Juventus doesn't sound that bad in terms of pedigree. But yeah, it was a frustrating evening. I expected this to be a difficult game because obviously it's the hardest game on paper that Arsenal have in the Champions League group stage. Inter had some players out, but obviously, you know, they're a very, very strong team, hadn't conceded a goal themselves going into this game. So that's kind of how it proved to be. Start of the game, obviously Denzel Dumfries. Just always nice to say his name, isn't it? Nice to hear it, nice to say it. He rattled the bar early on, and there were a couple of nervy moments. And again, something that's been really characteristic of Arsenal in this period they're having has been sloppy passing. There's a little bit more of that. But I thought, actually, as the first half wore on, they got back into the game quite well and started to assert themselves a little bit. And it felt a little bit more like the game was a bit more even, like it could go either way. I started to believe, and then obviously the penalty happens in quite frustrating circumstances, and that makes it really difficult. Changes the game. Second half was very different, but yet again, a lot of penetration, a lot of kind of pressure without any penetration, and it was almost like Arsenal had decided to try and play the game like as a game of header and volleys, just in swinging crosses into the box. Yes. That was sort of it. That was very much their only idea. Yeah,
and of course, when you don't have a player like Harry Wilson to get on the end of those crosses when you're playing headers and volleys, then you've got no chance.
The man thrives in midair. He was born in the sky, presumably.
Lord of the Skies, Harry Wilson. I mean, I if I'm honest with you, and if I may sound smug for a moment, Jim, which is not probably what you wanted me to do, but you are used to me. I thought this was quite an easy result to predict. I predicted 1-0 for it. I got every other result wrong on the night.
That tells us those stories.
Yes, but to me, it was. I said on the Ramble on Wednesday that Inter I had down as slight favourites. And
home advantage is big in a game like this, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and Inter are a good side. I mean, they are, what are they, second in Serie A? A side with some canny players. I mean, you said they had players out, yeah, but you look at even who they had on the bench. I mean, to bring on a player like Barella is just...
That's kind of who I mean, really, when I talk about players being out. A lot of their better players started on the bench, didn't they?
Yeah, and you saw that, and they do have a good side, and they are the most likely of the Italian sides to make an impression on this competition. I mean, they got to the final, for crying out loud, against Man City not that long ago, and it's also Inter's 4th clean sheet in a row in the Champions League. Now, I appreciate Arsenal were just one goal away from that themselves, but I thought it was going to be a decent defensive display from Inter, but my goodness, they did have to work for it. I understand you're right to say about the lack of penetration from Arsenal, but there were some moments in particular when Kai Havertz had a shot where there were bodies flying through the air, and it was good old fashioned stuff from the Inter back line.
Yeah, it was a proper battle, wasn't it? It was the sort of thing you'd expect from an Italian team in the 90s almost. But what was really impressive about the way they defended, actually, was I thought one of their most effective defenders in the second half was actually Marcus Thuram, who kept occupying Saliba and kept asking questions of him, kept winning free kicks, was a real outlet, really, really sort of, won free kicks that alleviated pressure and allowed them to regroup. And what's sort of damning about it, from an Arsenal perspective, is how comfortable they were in doing it. Now, Inter are obviously a very, very good team who are comfortable with a lot of challenges thrown their way. But, there's a pattern emerging now where Arsenal really struggle to break teams like this down. And you can point to the absence of Martin Odegaard, as we mentioned recently, but you can't only have one player who can unpick a lock. And it feels like the way the team is calibrated at the moment simply isn't getting the best out of the more creative players that you do have at your disposal. Now, this may be a little bit out of left field, but when Martin Odegaard was first injured, a lot of people were wondering how the team would be restructured to kind of get that creative fulcrum in that position. And a few people said, might it be worth giving Bukayo Saka a go in that part of the pitch? And I guess we're not going to see it now because Odegaard came on later. But I would be interested to see if that would have had any effect in this little period of games, because he's very good at beating his man, and you can do that in the middle of the pitch as well as being able to do it on the flank. So perhaps it would change the way they play far too much to lose him from the right wing. But just a thought. Think it would have been interesting, but. Yeah, it was all too predictable, all too predictable.
It was a little bit, yeah. I mean, Jim, you might rubbish this comment I'm about to make, but you know me. I'm an old-fashioned romantic and an England fan at heart. I wouldn't have minded to see Raheem Sterling brought on and playing a kind of central role, or him swapping with Saka.
Yeah, I think basically in the cameos that Raheem Sterling has made, he's been pretty ineffective though. Yeah. And had he come on for Gabriel Martinelli, who I thought did a lot of defensive work very well, which is a really, really big part of his game that goes overlooked quite a lot. I don't know if Sterling gives you that in the same way. So, yeah, I'm not sure he would have been the player to essentially break up that pattern of crosses being swung in with a little bit of hope and not much else.
All right, Mr. Analytical. Yeah, sorry about that. That was just my...
it's always nice to see Raheem.
But yeah, I mean, Arsenal put in 46 crosses in this game, the second most in the Champions League this season, presumably behind David Moyes' Manchester United. But it does go
still lingering.
And a very unnecessary reference there, everybody. I mean, it does. Yes, there was a lot of talk in commentary about Arsenal perhaps needing another option off the bench, an old-fashioned centre forward. Doesn't have to be old-fashioned; it could be new-fashioned as well. That chat never seems to go away from Arsenal, does it? We had that for years under Wenger, and we've still got it with Arteta. What do you think about that? Because was this a case of that? Because I understand that if you do play with the archetypal sort of big man up top, that kind of thing, you chuck him on there to get something. Arsenal, do they go out and get Wout Weghorst, Jim, for example? If people think, oh, come on. But if they're just shoving crosses into the box anyway...
Yeah.
I mean, Kai Havertz is decent in the air, so I don't think it was like the most ludicrous of things to do. But as an Arsenal fan, do you think it would be nice maybe to have that option on the bench?
Well, especially, I mean, obviously you want as dynamic a set of goal-scoring options as possible in your squad if you're sort of picking your dream squad. Yeah. But you're absolutely right to talk about the pattern of play that Arsenal tried over and over and over again, which is tailor-made for a player like that. The concern of mine is that it's very difficult. They find it really difficult to kind of make space and get in kind of, one-on-one, two-on-one, or whatever sort of situations against opposition defenders. I know that's difficult with the way Inter defended and the quality that they have. But yeah, I mean, this it's like there was talk for a long, long time that Arsenal didn't have a proper defensive midfielder because the same problems come up, and this is almost sort of the modern version of that. And Kai Havertz did a really good job in that role last year. I think because of that, Arteta has trusted him to essentially make that role his own. He came in as no one really knew what his best position was. He's a sort of hybrid kind of number 9, number 10 kind of odd player. And I think because he had a good goal return last season, Arteta has maybe challenged him to step up and score more goals. While saying that, he's playing in the midfield at the moment. So he sort of is this player and he sort of isn't that player. And Gabriel Jesus has scored 1 goal since January. So there is a good reason that this conversation is coming up again. And it does look like it might be something that sort of is going to cost Arsenal. Now, last season they scored more goals in the Premier League than they've ever scored before. So you would think that in itself is a great reason that the system works and there's no need to throw a sort of traditional number 9 in there. Yeah, there's absolutely no need to panic and bring Ashley Barnes in, for example. But, as we've seen tonight, it perhaps is an area that still feels like it's lacking when you are playing a game where someone has to score a half chance. But, those players are rare, right?
They are. Although there's a big lad at Nottingham Forest scoring a fair few like that, Jim. I'm touting a move for
everyone's
for Chrissy.
Scoring there.
Yeah, it's true for Chrissy Wood there. But I mean, it's funny though because you mentioned the Premier League. Arsenal scoring a lot of goals last season. They've not been brilliant in the Premier League this season, but it is early days, and you'd think, okay, they get going with red cards and blah blah blah. There's something about Arsenal in Europe though. even though they've done okay. I mean, a draw away to Atalanta in the first game is not a terrible result. Europa League champion.
Thing is, that result though felt like they were trying to get a 0-0. It was very unadventurous, very unambitious.
Sure. Well, okay.
And I think it sounds like you think I'm saying, oh, actually, we wanted it to be a 0-0, so why are you having a go? I'm saying I think it could have been a bit more ambitious, actually.
Yeah, okay. Perhaps I'm being a touch generous. With 2-0 at home to PSG is a decent result. 1-0 against Shakhtar. Look, a win's a win, but you'd have fancied maybe a few more. But again, those kind of results can happen. 1-0 away to Inter. That can happen as well. Inter went to Man City earlier on and drew 0-0. So it's not terrible. And I understand they got to the quarterfinals last season and were beaten by Bayern, of course. So again, no shame there. But there's something about Arsenal in European competition under Arteta that I just don't think that we see the best of them. We see the best of them in the Premier League, and I don't know what it is. Is there something that you can put your finger on? Do you think the players, it's that different style of football, it's coming up against different teams? Is there a lack of street wisdom?
I think they very often approach games in Europe, even where they would be the team of higher status, with a lot of trepidation. And it's very sort of safety first. And we've seen a lot of it in the Premier League this season and last season, sort of to better effect last season than this season. But that seems to be the sort of default approach in Europe. And actually it means sometimes you play within yourself, and sometimes you don't try and fashion a chance if it's a little bit risky because you might get done on the break, which leads to these quite stodgy performances, and also means when you're in trouble, suddenly you've got to shift up a couple of gears to get something. And I think that's absolutely been an issue.
I think that's what it is. When Arsenal play in Europe, most teams they play against, the vast majority of teams they play against in Europe, they are the better side. And I feel that doesn't quite translate to European football. And it's why that, and you've just articulated it there, so I won't go over that again. And I feel that's a little bit, I don't know what Arteta's got to do. Do you feel that he maybe is thinking it's a long season, there's a lot of games, let's just nice and easy. Not, let's just go through it again, because if Arsenal play reasonably well, most of the time they won't lose a football match.
Yeah, I wonder if there is a bit of that, actually. A little bit of trying to weather what is, a fairly difficult set of circumstances early on. There have been a few runs of difficult away games. They've played, like most of the top 9 already in the Premier League, a lot of those games away. And obviously, it's impossible to say how the sort of league table is going to fall at the start of the season. But yeah, there have been a lot of games there where I think he's probably thought, this is a tough run. Let's try and perhaps not go absolutely hell for leather, because we need to save our best form for later in the season. But if that is the case, it's possibly backfired a little bit, because the Bournemouth performance wasn't good, even before William Saliba was sent off. It was similar to the Newcastle performance, which is a much better idea of where they are, because obviously they had 11 men on the pitch the whole time and they were dreadful. Today felt a little bit kind of lackluster as well. Like they're kind of a little bit, it's like they're out of ideas a little bit.
Yeah.
And these things become chronic, don't they? It looks like scoring a goal is really hard at the moment.
In their last 6 away games in the Premier League and the Champions League, Arsenal have scored just once from open play, which was that screamer by Calafiori against Manchester City.
That's amazing.
I stress it, from open play.
Still, though, I think
it's not to take away what they can do from corners, but
this is the obvious thing everyone's saying as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
for good reason. It's like it does feel like they've become far too dependent on that, and it might, it may be an overly simplistic view, but it certainly, that stat kind of backs it up, really, doesn't it?
Well, it does, yeah. I mean, people have said, are they more Mourinho than Guardiola? If they're relying on set pieces, are they more Allardyce than Guardiola, Jim?
Maybe.
We've talked a lot about Arsenal. We've talked a little bit about the game. We haven't mentioned the penalty that Mikel Merino conceded. You just can't throw your arms around like that in the box, Jim.
You
Otherwise,
cannot, make yourself unnaturally bigger. I think that's the wording of it. People talk about unnatural position. I think it's an unnatural size is the wording of it now, which is quite something. I can't make myself bigger than I am. I don't know who can, but that kind of weird little thing aside, yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where it's like, I almost don't have the energy to be annoyed at it being a penalty, because they're the sort of ones where you go like, Can he really get his arm out of the way there? Has he made himself unnaturally bigger when they're that close together? I don't know, but it was given, and you have to respond to it essentially.
I mean, if you do go in with your foot a little bit high, try not to balance yourself with your arms like that. You've just got to basically, if you fall over, you fall over. That's it. Mikel Arteta said post-match, "We were very harshly done by both penalties. If you're going to give a penalty for the handball, the other one has to be a penalty because he punches him in the head." And that is a reference to when Jan Sommer went up with Mikel Merino. I suppose the replays suggested that Sommer just got a little bit of contact with the ball. Otherwise, it probably would have been given as a penalty.
Yeah. I thought there was going to be a VAR check and that it was likely to be a penalty from that, but apparently, they didn't even suggest that it needed to go to it. So frustrating, but again, it's just.
Yeah, I think, look, as you say, the penalty's been given. Whatever one thinks of the not the offside law, the handball law, it seems incredibly harsh to me. We see them given, and on the odd occasion we don't, and that is the way it goes. I mean, nicely tucked away from Çalhanoğlu, but I mean, we can criticise Arsenal, but other than that, really, they didn't concede. Well, I mean, that's not really conceding a chance from open play. No,
just that and the Dumfries one, wasn't it? Would you? Yeah. Sorry, just to go back to that. Yes. Obviously, I am annoyed that Arsenal conceded a soft penalty and weren't given a penalty. Should I smash the living room up? Is that better content if I go full angry Arsenal fan?
What have you got in you? I mean, do you have any Ming vases in the living room?
I don't have any Ming vases. Got quite a lot of breakable stuff.
Do you have any Tyrone Mings vases?
I do not. More on him later. Yeah, I could make my living room into a raid room. That's what I'm saying. Just say the word.
The word being?
Oh, don't you know?
I wish I did, Jim.
You're watching a clip from the Football Ramble podcast. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss an upload. A single upload. Don't miss out on the uploads. The uploads are important.